Hey guys, welcome to Ultralight Outdoors. My name is Cameron, and today we are going to set up new guylines and ridgeline on my new Cuban fiber tarp I got. This is a 12-foot Cuban fiber or DCF tarp from Dutchware, and I bought this secondhand. If you saw my latest trip video out with my boys hammock camping, I took this tarp on that trip, and when I went to set it up, which I know you're not supposed to do, but I just trusted the guylines that the person I bought it from had on there, and they were way too short. They're also, part of them are just 550 paracord, and that's just not going to do for me. So I ordered stuff from Dutchware. This is the exact same setup that I have on my Cloudburst tarp from Warbonnet. I love the way this is set up. It's super easy, and the math on how much guyline to buy and everything works out really well. So I'm going to show you how I set up my guylines and ridgeline on my hammock tarps, and we're going to go ahead and put some on here today. So what I got in my package from Dutch is this is a reflective Zing-It or Lash-it or whichever one it is, I don't know. But it has the reflective strip that runs through there, and I like to have that for when my kids are with me, especially. Their headlamps will hit that at night, and they'll be able to see the cords. As I mentioned in that last trip video, I like to put my guylines out real far and pitch my tarp wide because it's usually pretty good weather whenever we're going. So I don't normally need to batten down the hatches and have everything down low and tight. So my guylines go out pretty far, and I want to make sure nobody runs into them. So this is 100 foot of that reflective Zing-It, and I will show you how I break that down here in just a minute. Other than that, I got this here. You probably can't see them. There's two Dutchware Fleas down in the bottom, and I use those on my ridgeline, and that is how I basically tie up my ridgeline on each side. I don't use a continuous ridgeline. I've never liked that. The split ridgeline, which just means I have one separate cord going from one end of the tarp around a tree and back to itself, and then I have another separate cord going from the other end of the tarp around the tree and back to itself. I do not use a continuous ridge line that goes all the way through the tarp. And so I got two of these Fleas. This is the same way I have set up on my Cloudburst tarp. And I will show you exactly how the Fleas work and how I attach them to the tarp. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is break down this line of Zing-It or Lash-it or whatever it is. And this is 100 feet. It's 100 continuous foot. So when you buy this from Dutch, he sells it in 25-foot increments. But however many increments you order, it's going to come all as one continuous piece. So I ordered 4 increments of this cord, and so I got 100 continuous feet, and that'll help out for how I like to break down my guylines. So the way that I do it is I use 20 foot on each end of my ridge line. So I have the split ridge line, so 20 foot around this end, 20 foot around this end. That gives me plenty of extra cord to wrap around the trees and then come back to the flea that I put on there. I also use a really small amount to attach the flea to the tarp, but it's 6 inches worth of cord, so I don't even really factor that in. Then on top of that's 40 foot total for my ridge line. Then I use the remaining 60 feet for my 6 individual guylines, and so they are 10 foot apiece, and that gives me plenty of flexibility to set my tarp up however I want. And especially around here where everything is rock, we don't have a lot of loose soil to be able to stake in. Sometimes you need to be able to move your lines way far out or way far in, or however it works out. So that is how the math works out. I do 20 foot for each end of my ridge line, so for a total of 40 feet, and then do a 10 foot for each of my guylines. There's 6 of them. That is my 100 total feet. So let's cut this up, and with the magic of video, here we go. All right, so we got them all broken down. I have my 2 20-foot sections over here, and then I have 6 10-foot sections over here, and then I ended up with a little bit extra, a couple feet, and I thought I remembered that last time I ordered some from Dutch, that I got a couple extra feet, and this will be more than enough to be able to tie our fleas onto our tarp. So next, we need to go through and melt the ends of all these cords so that they do not come unraveled. And it works a lot better if you use a patriotic lighter like this, but you can use any sort of lighter that you want. Oh, one thing I will say is when you go to cut your guy lines, so the way that I do it is that I measured out one 10-foot section, and then I used that one to cut all the other ones. I will say to use the original one on every single one, so that whenever, like say you measured one with your original one and cut it, and then you use the second one to measure the third one, and then the third one to measure the fourth one, you'll end up like, you know, that old movie Multiplicity, where they clone the guy and then they use one of the clones to make another clone, and that clone is way off. All that to say, make sure your measurements are accurate, because you don't want to get to the end and have way too much left over. I measured one of my ridge lines, which was the very last thing I cut, and it was within a couple inches of being exactly 20 foot. So everything came out good. So I'm going to go through and melt the ends of all these, and that is a very simple process. You don't want to burn the rope, but you just want to singe it just enough that it will not come unraveled, kind of like that. And I'm going to do that for all of these guy lines. All right, so now that we have our guy lines with the ends melted on them, and they're all just about ready to go, let's talk about the fleas and how I set up that section of the ridge line. So I have one of the fleas here completely done with the little loop of cord that I made for it. This is the flea up close. Now, you definitely don't have to have this or something like this to set up your ridge lines, but I use these because they are cheap and they are super simple when setting up your ridge line. So instead of having to retie knots or anything like that on the ridge line, if I don't get it set up just right, it's just really easy to undo all of this. So this is one of the fleas that is not have any guy line on it, and it's really small, as you can tell here. You definitely want to make sure this stays attached to some guy line and your tarp, and it weighs 1 gram. I'm going to put it on my scale here, and as you can see there, it doesn't even register in any sort of tenths of ounces or anything like that. Super lightweight, and so yeah, I definitely like that. Anyway, so here is about the length of the cord that I use for it, and I'm just going to go ahead and make another one. Now, these fleas can take up to a 2.2 millimeter cord. This reflected is 1.8 millimeter, and a good way to know, if you don't know for sure exactly how big your cord is this hole right here is probably about as big as 2.2 millimeter. It's a little bit hard getting this 1.8 reflected through there, but I think that it works out really well. So let's get this other one set up, and then we'll get it on the tarp, and we will start working on the guy lines. All right, so here's about the length of cord I have. I have it melted on both ends, and I'm going to take my extra flea here and get this guy line through there. It's a little bit tricky because if you melt the ends, they are a little bit bigger trying to get them through there. But if you work it through, eventually you will get this through there. So once you get the cord through there, you can go ahead and tie whatever sort of knot you like to tie. It really doesn't matter as long as it holds. You're not going to be taking this knot out. It's going to just stay in this cord permanently. I like to tie a bowline knot, not for any particular reason other than it's just one of the ones that I can remember how to tie. And that is a real strong knot, and that will stay in there forever. And I'm going to go ahead and trim these ends up just so I don't have so much hanging off here. So here it is with the ends trimmed up, and from both of those together on my scale, as you can see, you still doesn't really register. So definitely no weight penalty for these. They're pretty cheap. I think they're like $6 a piece, and it just makes it super simple to put your cord on here. So Dutch sends this little information card of how exactly this works. I guess they're primarily meant to go on your D-rings at the bottom to stake your tent out, but I use them on my tarp on the Ridgeline, and they've always held. I've never had any problem with them. This here is the flea. This would be the part going back to your tarp. And then here you just wrap the cord through the mouth or the eye of the flea. Take it around this little knob right here and then cinch it through the wing part. And I'll show you with a piece of cord after I get these on here. All right, I got my 2 fleas right here. And this is the old paracord Ridgeline that the person I bought it from put on here. I'm just going to take that off real quick. They just put some kind of random knots in here, and pull that off and get rid of it. No longer need that. So to put the fleas on, super simple. Since we already have our knot in this loop here, we are just going to lark's head this piece of loop on here, and that's basically just taking it, sticking it straight through there, and then sticking that back through in on itself. And so now it is on there. So now it's the loop itself, it would not be easy to take off of the flea, but the whole loop with the flea is super easy to take off this. So if you wanted to take this off and put it on another tarp, or for whatever reason you wanted to take it off, it would be really easy to do so. But this will stay on here all the time, and I never have any problem with these getting wrapped up in my other guy lines or anything, because they're short. They don't go down to the part of the stuff sack where that's at. So that works out really well. Put one on the other end, and then we'll start working on the ridge lines and the guy lines. So now I'm going to take each guy line and each ridge line and tie a bowline in one end of each cord. This will be the only knot we have to tie, and it's basically the same exact thing we're doing with the fleas and the little loop to be able to put them on the D-ring. I'm just making a bowline knot with a little loop on the end. That way I can lark's head it onto each one of the D-rings. And then once we do that, we never have to worry about retying a knot at the tarp itself. This will be on there really securely, but also they can be taken off pretty easily without untying any knots if you wanted to take them off and swap them out to a different tarp or something like that. So I'm going to go through and tie the bowline onto each one of these guy lines real quick. All right, so I have my knots tied in. This is one of my ridge lines, the 20-foot piece, and this is one of my guy lines, the 10-foot piece, and I was going to show you how I lark's head those onto the tarp itself. This ridge line will go onto the same D-ring as your flea is attached to, and that's as simple as taking the loop and pushing it through. Then in the open piece, run the line back through there and pull the whole ridge line through. It's pretty long. And then get that loop up over top of the knot and tighten it down. So then there you have your flea right here and your ridge line right here. This part is going to go out and run around the tree, and then it's going to come back to this flea where we will cinch it down. That part right there is done. Then your guy line will go on the corner of the tarp on the other D-rings, and it'll just be on there by itself with no flea. Of course, if you wanted to put fleas on each one of your guy lines to where you could do a similar setup, you could definitely do that. I have that pulled through, and there you go. So I'm going to do that for my other ridge line and my 5 other guy lines, and then we'll be pretty much set up on this. Well, guys, I have all my guy lines on here now, and my ridge lines as well. And I was just going to show you a couple different ways you can manage having so much cord on there. So normally what I do is I'll take 2 corresponding guy lines, like 2 that are on the same end, grab them both at the same time, just wrap them around my hand, and then stick them in there together. This tarp is in snake skins. I've never used snake skins before. I don't know that I'll continue to use them. I'm going to try them out for a while. These particular ones have a little pocket down in the end. So this end I have the ridge line all rolled up and stuffed into there. And so that is one way to keep that kind of out of the way. And then here you can see, here's the flea hanging off the other end. My other one is, this is the Ridgeline, and I have the tarp snakeskin pulled up over the tarp, and then I have that just wrapped around there a bunch of times, and that's generally how I do, like say, my cloudburst tarp. I have the whole tarp stuffed in, and then on one end I have the cord on the outside of the bag wrapped all the way around there, so that I can take that one Ridgeline, put it around a tree, and then pull the whole tarp out at one time. You can do your guy lines and ridge lines. You can put those in the bag. However works out best for you. That's just what works good for me. So now we are going to head over to Cleburne State Park and set this thing up and get it all staked out. And we are going to make some short little lines out of shock cord for the pullouts that are on there. This is definitely totally optional. A lot of tarps don't have pullouts. I think they work great for just really opening up the tarp, especially over a ridge runner or bridge hammock like what I use. And you can make those long to where they go out to a tree or stake to the ground or something like that. I carry separate poles that weigh about 4 ounces that go over top of the tarp, and I'll show you what all that looks like. But anyway, let's go set up the tarp and let's see what our new ridge lines and guy lines look like. All right, so I got my tarp here in the snake skin, and you can see how I tucked all that up in there earlier, and it is ready to go. So now I got a good, clean, even line to hang around the tree over there. Here is my piece of Dutch hardware, and let's go hang it up. So as you can probably see behind me, just real quickly got each end strung up, and it's just slightly farther over to the left. So with this split line system, you can't just slide the tarp back and forth like you could do on a continuous ridge line. So what I like to do is get it strung up pretty close to what I think it's going to be, and then basically I'm just going to walk down here, loosen this one up a tiny bit, walk down here and tighten this one up, and that'll be it. All right, so I got the tarp strung up there. You can see how I got it nice and level now. That's something I didn't have originally. I had to go back down and adjust this end. But once you see that everything is level, it's really easy in these snake skins here, which, like I said earlier, I've never dealt with, but it's real easy to tell that it's level. I got about the same amount between each tree. So now I am ready to pull those snake skins back and stake out my tarp. All right, so this should give you a little bit different angle of how the tarp is set up. Now, generally, I like to set my tarps up high with a really wide angle, and that just for me is because generally I'm going camping in better weather. If I was going camping, I knew it was going to storm, I definitely would want it pitched down a little tighter. But also, I use a bridge hammock, which has spreader bars, which stick out wide, and whenever you sit down in the hammock, the bars will go up toward the sides, and you don't want those hitting the sides of your tarp. So I generally set my tarp up high and wide and my hammock a little bit lower. Now, if it's going to storm, I would definitely set it up a little bit differently and just be careful getting in and out of my hammock. But I wanted to take you around, give you a couple close-ups of what some of these tie-outs look like, and give you an idea of all the work we did, how that sets up out in the field. Okay, so here you can see where we have the guy line lark setted onto the tarp, what we did at home. and then we'll follow that down here and show you. Here is our stake in the ground, and it is just larks headed on the same exact knot we did earlier. And then you see all this excess we have. So all this here, this is all just extra guy line. And the reason we have that, why I made the guy line so long, is like I was saying, I like to spread the tarp way out wide. It's actually pitched a little bit tighter than what I normally would. And if you'll see on that center guy line there, how it comes out at a way wider angle, that's more typical of how I would normally do my guy lines. So with that, we follow this all the way out here. I could put that stake farther out on the guy line and stretch that thing way out here another few feet, and then I'm going to have a way wider pitch like what I have there on that center guy line. So here is a close-up shot of our titanium hardware that we have on here. And this is the snake skin that just sits up here out of the way. And you can see, so from the tarp itself, we have this line here, and it runs all the way up, just loops itself around the tree, no knots or anything up there, and then back to itself right here. So around our hardware, it just goes around this mouth right here, loops around, and then it cinches itself back here on this wing section. And I do it twice. You definitely don't have to, but that's just for a little added peace of mind that that thing's not going to come out of there. And just cinch that, pull that tight, and then you can see all this extra line we have right here, whole bunch of extra. And what I do with that is just keep that down there. It's really not in the way. You could tie it up if you wanted to, but what that allows us to do is these trees that I have here are fairly close together, and keep in mind that that is a 12-foot tarp. So imagine some trees that are a little less than ideal are another 8 or 10 foot apart. I can make this thing fit in between really long distances. And then with my bridge hammock, it also needs a slightly longer distance to be able to set up in between trees. So that works out really well. So I can set up in between something short. I could have a pair of trees that are 2 or 3 foot closer together. These are just about perfect, or I could have trees that are, like I said, like 8 or 10 foot farther apart. Having the longer guy lines just gives you a huge amount of flexibility. Trust me, I've been in situations where I haven't had long enough guy lines, and that really sucks because especially places like here in Texas, there's not a ton of options at a lot of the campsites you come to, so it's best to have longer guy lines, in my opinion. Gives you way more options, and you can set up pretty much wherever. So I've got the line set up for the pole mod that goes over the top, and I just have these simply larks headed on here, just same exact knot we used on our blue guy lines, and then larks headed to this end. It comes off super simple. So I have that on the other side, and then here you can see this end of the pole is not connected yet. So basically it is just a larks headed loop onto here, and then another straight piece of cord. That's how everything on this tarp is set up. Super simple. So I'm going to go ahead and attach this, and then I'll get my hammock set up. This should give you an idea of how much room is there in the tarp, and now it's time to set up the hammock. All right, so here you can see just how much room is under there. This is actually, like I said, a little more narrow than what I would normally pitch it, but still a ton of room under there with the hammock. I'll give you a side shot here in just a second. There are a couple feet on each end that the hammock sits up under the tarp, and the reason that is because with the bridge hammock, it's a little bit shorter of a hammock because you don't need the excess length on each end for the gathered in part of the hammock. So I wasn't sure exactly how this would all go together. This is the first time I've actually had this hammock under this tarp fully deployed and everything, but it looks like there's plenty of space under there. I'm really happy with the way it turned out. All right, so this is a really great shot of how much room there is under this tarp. Like I said, you can see there's several feet, probably 2 foot on each end, extra room under this 12-foot Dutchware tarp. Absolutely massive amount of room. It does seem a little more narrow width-wise compared to my older Cloudburst tarp, and I'm sure it is, but definitely lengthwise there's a ton of room, and I wasn't sure how the spreader bars were going to work on the tarp itself, the pole mod, because they're not exactly lined up with my hammock spreader bars, but it seems like there's a ton of room under there, so I'm really happy with the way it turned out. Well, there you have it, guys. I hope this little tutorial or at least explanation of how I set up my guylines helped out in some way. Like I said, all tarps are kind of different. You may not need 6 guylines. You may need 4. Just do the math, whatever works out best for you. But just my opinion, it's better to have more line than shorter lines. If you go with really short guylines, you're really not saving hardly any weight at all, and you're really limiting yourself on how you can set up your tarp. So I think the 100 feet works awesome for me, and it may work good for you. Just go with whatever you think. But when you go to order your line or go to buy it at the store or whatever you're doing, I would suggest going with a little bit longer than what you may be thinking. So anyways, guys, thanks a lot for following along. Like I said, hope it helped, and we'll see you next time.